The human mind has a peculiar feature that almost everyone overlooks. When you sit down to study something difficult, a chapter of physics, a mathematical proof, a complex idea, your brain operates in one of two fundamentally different modes. The mode you're in determines whether you truly understand or merely memorize. And here's what matters. You can switch between these modes deliberately in about 60 seconds. Let's start with something you probably recognize. You're reading a textbook, following along, nodding at each sentence. Everything seems to make sense as your eyes move across the page. You reach the end of the chapter, close the book, and suddenly realize you can't explain what you just read. The words went in, but nothing stuck. This happens to students everywhere, every day, and they blame themselves. I'm not smart enough. I don't have a mind for this subject. Some people just get it, and I don't. But this has nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with which mode your brain was operating in. Here's the distinction that changes everything. Your brain can either receive information passively, or it can actively wrestle with it. When you read that textbook and things seem clear, you're in receiving mode. Information flows past your eyes, registers as familiar patterns, creates a temporary sense of understanding. This mode feels comfortable, even pleasant. No strain, no confusion, everything smooth. But this smoothness is deceptive. You're not building real understanding, you're building an illusion of understanding. The second mode, the active mode, feels completely different. It's uncomfortable. When you engage this mode, you stop following along and start questioning. You pause after a sentence and ask yourself, can you explain this concept without looking at the page? Could you teach this to someone else? What would happen if you changed one variable in this equation? Why does this principle work this way and not another? This mode creates mental friction. Your brain has to work. And that work, that strain you feel, that's exactly what builds genuine understanding. The remarkable thing is this: most people never deliberately choose which mode they're in. They default to passive receiving because it's easier, because it feels like progress, because turning pages and highlighting sentences creates a satisfying sense of productivity. Then they wonder why nothing stays with them, why they can't apply what they've learned, why exam day brings panic instead of confidence. So here's the 60-second switch that activates the deeper mode. Close whatever you're studying. Look away from the page. Now, explain out loud what you just read, not in the book's words, but in your own language. Pretend you're teaching it to someone who knows nothing about the subject. Speak it aloud, actual words in actual sentences, not vague thoughts in your head. Within seconds, something happens. You discover gaps. Concepts that seemed crystal clear a moment ago now feel fuzzy. Connections you thought you understood fall apart when you try to articulate them. Words fail you. You stumble. You realize you can't actually explain this thing you thought you knew. This moment of confusion, this is not failure. This is the activation point. This is where real learning begins. The brain has a peculiar characteristic. It cannot distinguish between familiarity and understanding. When you read something, your brain recognizes patterns, connects to existing knowledge, and signals, yes, this makes sense. But recognition isn't the same as comprehension. Think about how you can recognize a friend's face instantly without being able to describe or draw it accurately. Recognition is automatic, surface level. Understanding requires something deeper. When you force yourself to explain something without the source material in front of you, you move from recognition to reconstruction. Your brain must retrieve the concept, organize it into coherent structure, translate it into language, and present it logically. Every gap in your understanding becomes immediately obvious. You can't fake it. You can't gloss over the parts you don't quite grasp. The explanation either works or it doesn't. This process does something fascinating. It exposes the difference between what you think you know and what you actually know. And that difference is where growth happens. Every gap you discover is a precise target for further study. Instead of rereading entire chapters, hoping something will stick better the second time, you now know exactly which specific concepts need more attention. But here's where it gets more interesting. The act of attempting to explain something even when you struggle, even when you fail, strengthens your understanding far more than passive review ever could. The brain remembers what it works to retrieve. When you force yourself to reconstruct an idea from memory, you're not just testing your knowledge, you're actively reinforcing the neural pathways that encode that knowledge. Think about what happens physically when you try to recall something. Your brain searches through its networks, making connections, activating related concepts, constructing bridges between ideas. Every failed attempt, every moment of struggle, every wait, how does this work again, strengthens those pathways. The difficulty isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. The harder your brain works to retrieve and reconstruct information, the more permanently that information embeds itself. This explains something that puzzles many students. Why cramming the night before an exam produces such fragile knowledge. When you frantically review material hours before a test, everything feels familiar. You recognize concepts, nod along, tell yourself, yes, I know this. But you haven't forced your brain to actively retrieve and reconstruct anything. You've created recognition without understanding. The moment the exam presents that knowledge in a slightly different context or asks you to apply it in an unexpected way, the whole structure collapses. You knew it last night. Why can't you remember it now? Because you never actually knew it. You recognized it. Contrast this with someone who regularly practices active recall. They close the book and explain concepts aloud. They struggle, discover gaps, go back and study those specific points, then try explaining again. They repeat this cycle. By exam day, they've reconstructed those ideas dozens of times. The knowledge isn't sitting on the surface as fragile recognition. It's embedded deep as robust understanding. When the exam throws unexpected questions, their brain has practiced manipulating these concepts in multiple ways. They can adapt, apply, extend what they know. Now, let's go deeper into the mechanism. Why does speaking the explanation out loud matter so much? Why not just think through it silently? The answer lies in how language forces precision. When you explain something in your head, your thoughts can remain vague and impressionistic. You can wave your mental hand at fuzzy concepts and tell yourself, yeah, basically that, without really articulating anything concrete. But when you speak aloud, you must form complete sentences. You must choose specific words. You must organize ideas into sequential order. This requirement for precision exposes every crack in your understanding. Try this experiment. Take something you think you understand well, a process you perform regularly, a principle from your field, a skill you're confident in. Now explain it aloud as if teaching a complete beginner. Don't just describe what to do. Explain why it works this way. Explain what would happen if you changed one step. Explain the underlying principle. You'll likely find yourself saying, more than you expected. Pausing to find the right words. Backtracking because your first explanation wasn't quite right. Realizing you're using jargon without explaining what it means. Discovering that your understanding was actually a collection of memorized procedures without deep comprehension of the principles underneath. This is valuable information. These struggles show you exactly where your understanding is superficial, and now you know precisely what to investigate further. Here's another layer. Explaining aloud also reveals logical gaps and contradictions that silent review misses. When you read a textbook, your brain automatically fills in missing steps. It papers over logical leaps. It connects dots that aren't actually connected on the page, drawing from your existing knowledge to make things seem more coherent than they are. But when you speak an explanation, you must make every step explicit. If there's a logical gap, you stumble over it. If two ideas contradict each other, the contradiction becomes obvious when you try to state both clearly. This is why the best students don't just study, they teach. Even if they're teaching an imaginary audience, even if they're explaining to an empty room, the act of teaching forces a level of understanding that passive study never reaches. Teachers know this phenomenon well. You never truly master a subject until you've taught it. Not because teaching adds new information, but because teaching demands that you reconstruct the entire logical structure from foundations to conclusions, exposing every weak spot in your grasp. Let's talk about application, because understanding the principle isn't enough. You need to see how to use it practically. Suppose you're studying thermodynamics. You've just read a section about entropy. It made sense while reading. Now close the book. Explain entropy to an imaginary student who's never heard the term. Use simple language. Give examples. Explain why it matters. If you're like most people on their first attempt, you'll stammer something about disorder and energy spreading out, and then peter out. You might remember the formal definition you read 10 minutes ago, but can you explain what it actually means? Can you give a concrete example? Can you say why this concept is important enough to have its own word? Go back to the book. Find exactly what you couldn't explain. Read that section again, but this time actively. Ask questions as you read. When it says entropy increases, ask yourself, increases compared to what? What exactly is measuring this increase? Why does it always increase what would happen if it decreased? What prevents it from decreasing? Now close the book again. Explain again. You'll do better this time, but you'll still find gaps. Good. Those gaps are your curriculum. They tell you precisely where to focus. Repeat this cycle. Each time through, your explanation gets clearer, more precise, more comprehensive. You're not just memorizing the textbook's words, you're building your own understanding from the ground up. By the 10th iteration, you can explain entropy clearly, give multiple examples, answer questions about edge cases, and connect it to other thermodynamic principles. This is real mastery, not the illusion of understanding that comes from nodding along while reading. Or consider mathematics. You've worked through a proof, following each step. It all checks out. Now, close your notebook. Reproduce the proof from memory, not the mechanical steps, the logical flow. Why does this step follow from the previous one? What makes this approach work? What would happen if you tried a different method? You'll quickly discover which parts you genuinely understood versus which parts you simply accepted because they were written in front of you. Maybe you followed the algebraic manipulations but don't really grasp why this particular technique was chosen. Maybe you understood each individual step but can't see the overall strategy. These revelations are gold. They transform vague, "I should probably review this," into specific, "I need to understand why we factor this expression here." The same principle applies to any field. Reading history, close the book and explain the causes of a war without looking at the text. Studying biology, describe how photosynthesis works as if teaching a classroom. Learning a language, explain a grammatical rule in your own words. Every field, every subject, every concept can be approached this way. Here's what happens when you make this your standard practice. Studying becomes efficient. Instead of spending hours rereading textbooks, hoping something will stick, you spend minutes identifying exactly what needs more work. Instead of generic anxiety about not getting it, you develop a precise map of your knowledge gaps. Instead of passive consumption that creates illusory progress, you engage in active construction that builds real understanding. And there's something deeper happening too. This practice develops a particular relationship with knowledge. You stop seeing learning as absorption information flowing from books into your brain and start seeing it as construction. You're not a vessel being filled. You're a builder assembling understanding piece by piece, testing each connection, ensuring everything fits together properly. This shift in perspective changes everything. When something doesn't make sense, you don't blame yourself for being stupid. You recognize it as a signal. There's a piece missing from your construction, a connection that needs strengthening, a principle that requires deeper investigation. Confusion becomes useful feedback rather than a source of frustration. You also develop what might be called intellectual honesty. You can no longer fool yourself about what you know. The moment you try to explain something and stumble, you face the truth. You don't actually understand this yet. This can be uncomfortable at first. It's easier to maintain the pleasant illusion that reading equals knowing. But this honesty is liberating. You stop wasting time on material you've already mastered. You stop feeling guilty about things you haven't mastered because you know exactly what needs work and you're working on it systematically. There's practical wisdom here that extends beyond academic subjects. This same principle applies to any skill, any knowledge, any understanding you want to develop. Want to truly understand how your car engine works? Read about it, then explain it aloud without notes. Want to master a recipe? Cook it once following instructions. Then explain the process and the principles behind each step without looking at the recipe. Want to understand a political position you disagree with? Study it, then explain the reasoning behind it as persuasively as possible without referring to your sources. The method is universal because it's based on how the brain actually works, not on tricks or shortcuts. You're not hacking your mind, you're using it properly. You're engaging the mechanism that evolution designed for deep learning, active retrieval and reconstruction. And here's the beautiful part. This 60-second practice closing the material and explaining aloud costs you almost nothing in time but multiplies the value of every minute you spend studying. 1 hour of active recall beats 5 hours of passive rereading. You learn more, retain longer, understand deeper, all while spending less total time studying. The brain is not a tape recorder that stores information exactly as received. It's a dynamic system that strengthens whatever it actively uses. Every time you force your brain to retrieve and reconstruct knowledge, you're telling it, this matters, keep this accessible, maintain these pathways. Every time you passively reread without testing yourself, you're telling your brain, this is just noise, no need to prioritize it. So the question isn't whether you have time to practice active recall. The question is whether you can afford not to. Every hour spent in passive study mode is an hour that produces minimal lasting value. Every minute spent in active retrieval mode is a minute that produces exponential returns. The path forward is simple. The next time you sit down to study anything, a chapter, an article, a set of notes, make this commitment. After every page, every section, every concept, close the material and explain it aloud. Struggle through the gaps. Identify what's missing. Go back and focus on exactly those gaps. Repeat, do this consistently, and something remarkable happens. Your relationship with learning transforms. Understanding becomes tangible rather than mysterious. Progress becomes measurable rather than vague. Confidence replaces anxiety because you know exactly what you know and what you don't. The brain wants to understand deeply. It's built for it. But it needs you to engage the right mode, the active, wrestling, reconstructing mode. That mode is always available, always just 60 seconds away. Close the book, speak the idea. Face the gaps honestly, fill them precisely. This is how genuine understanding is built, piece by piece, concept by concept, explanation by explanation. Not just in school, in everything. While other kids picked up math quickly, I struggled. While my classmates breezed through reading assignments, I labored over every page, while everyone else seemed to just get it. I felt like I was perpetually behind. And you know what everyone told me? You're just not as smart as the other kids. Some people are gifted. You're not one of them. Accept it. So I did. For years, I accepted that I was slow, that I'd always be playing catch up, that I'd never be one of the smart ones. Pause, shift energies. And then I discovered something that changed everything. Something that transformed me from the slowest person in the room to someone who could outthink almost anyone. Not a study hack. Not a memory trick. Not some magic pill. A method. Richard Feynman's method in direct adressability. And here's what shocked me: Feynman was slow too. At least, that's what people thought. While other physicists rattled off equations from memory, Feynman would sit there, working things out from scratch. While others moved quickly through problems, Feynman took his time, thinking deeply. People thought he was behind. They thought he was the slow one. They were wrong. He wasn't slow. He was thorough. And that thoroughness, that refusal to rush, that commitment to deep understanding, that's what made him unstoppable. Today, I'm going to show you Feynman's method, the exact process he used to go from being seen as slow to becoming one of the greatest minds in history. The same method I used to go from struggling student to someone who can learn anything. And here's what I promise you: by the end of this talk, you'll understand why being slow, really, truly understanding instead of quickly memorizing, is actually the fastest path to becoming unstoppable. Let's start with a story that reveals everything. Aesher tell this with building energy. It's the 1940s. Feynman is at Princeton working on his PhD. And there's this tradition among the physics grad students. They challenge each other with difficult problems. It's like intellectual combat. Who can solve problems the fastest? And all the students prepare for this. They memorize formulas. They study problem sets. They learn the standard tricks and techniques. They're optimizing for speed. Feynman doesn't do this. When someone throws a problem at him, he doesn't reach into his memory for a formula. He sits there. He thinks. He derives what he needs from basic principles. Right there. In real time. Pauses who, and everyone watches him, thinking, poor Feynman. He's so slow, he doesn't even have the formulas memorized. He's never going to keep up. But here's what happens. Feynman often solves the problems faster than the people who memorized everything. And when he's done, he can explain not just the answer, but why the answer works. He can modify the approach for variations. He can see connections to other problems. The memorizers get the answer. Feynman gets understanding. Hacka make the point, they looked fast. He was unstoppable. And that's the difference. That's what Feynman's method does. It makes you look slow at first, because you're doing deep work while everyone else is doing shallow work. But over time, the depth compounds. And eventually, you're not just keeping up, you're leading. You're unstoppable. Walk across stages. So what is this method? What did Feynman actually do that made him go from seeming slow to being unstoppable? Let me break it down for you. Because this isn't mystical. This isn't talent. This is a specific, repeatable process that anyone can use. The method has 4 parts, 4 principles that Feynman lived by. And each one, by itself, is powerful. But together, they create something extraordinary. Let me show you the first part. And this one is going to feel uncomfortable. Effect Directive Part 1, never pretend you understand something when you don't. Sounds simple, right? But almost nobody does this. We all pretend. All the time, you're in a meeting. Someone explains something you didn't quite follow, but everyone else is nodding. So you nod too. You pretend you got it. You're reading a textbook. There's a concept you don't fully grasp, but the book moves on, so you move on. You pretend you understood. You're in a conversation. Someone uses a term you don't know, but you don't want to look stupid by asking, so you pretend you know what they're talking about. So I point to this pretending, this faking it. This is what keeps you slow. Because every time you pretend to understand something, you build on a weak foundation. And eventually, that foundation crumbles. Feynman refused to pretend, ever. And it made him look slow. But it made him unstoppable. Tell this story. There's this famous moment at Princeton. Feynman is in a seminar. A renowned physicist is presenting. Complex stuff. Everyone's impressed. Everyone's nodding along. And Feynman raises his hand. I don't understand what you just said. The room goes silent, because everyone else is pretending they understand. These are the smartest physics students in the world, and they're all faking it. But Feynman isn't. He's admitting confusion. And you know what happens? 3 other students admit they didn't understand either. Then 5 more. Then suddenly everyone's asking questions. And it turns out the presenter hadn't explained it clearly at all. Ash pauses. The difference. Everyone else was moving fast, building on shaky understanding. Feynman was moving slow, building on solid ground. 6 months later, when they're working on advanced problems, the students who pretended to understand are struggling. They're going back, trying to relearn basics they never really learned. Feynman, he's moving forward, building on a solid foundation. Unstoppable. Warisha make it actionable-ish. So the first part of the method, stop pretending. When you don't understand something, admit it. To yourself, to others, and don't move on until you do understand. This will make you feel slow. People will move ahead while you're stuck on basics. But you're not actually slow. You're building the foundation that will make you unstoppable later. Now let me show you the second part of the method. And this one is the core of everything. Get intense. Part 2, explain everything in the simplest possible terms. This is the famous Feynman technique. And it's not just a nice idea. It's a diagnostic tool, a way to reveal what you actually understand versus what you just think you understand. Let me show you how powerful this is. A circ share this examples, and student comes to Feynman and says, I understand quantum mechanics. Feynman says, great. Explain it to me like I'm 12 years old. The student starts, well, in quantum mechanics, we have wave functions that collapse upon observation, and the superposition of states means. Feynman stops him. I'm 12. I don't know those words. Try again. The student struggles. He can't do it. He can use the jargon, but he can't make it simple. Well, I'm pausing. Feynman says, then you don't really understand quantum mechanics. You know the words. You know the equations. but you don't understand what's actually happening. Assange make the point that this is brutal, but it's true, and it's liberating. Because once you accept this standard, once you demand that you can explain things simply, you stop fooling yourself about what you understand, and that's when real learning begins. Give a concrete example. Let's try it right now. Pick something you think you understand from your work or your field. Got it. Now explain it to me like I'm 12. Simple words, clear examples, no jargon. Can you do it? Really do it without falling back on technical terms or complex explanations. Pause. If you're struggling, you've just discovered what Feynman's method reveals. You don't understand it as well as you thought. And that's perfect, because now you know exactly what you need to work on. Share the process. Here's what Feynman would do when he couldn't explain something simply. He'd go back. He'd break it down. He'd think about it from different angles. He'd find analogies. He'd simplify further and further until he hit bedrock. Concepts so basic they couldn't be simplified further. And then he'd build back up, using only simple language, clear logic, concrete examples. Hey, slow down, this takes time, this looks slow. While other people are racing ahead, using complex terminology, sounding smart, you're stuck at the basics, making things simple. But here's what happens. When you finally do understand something well enough to explain it simply, you understand it at a level those fast, moving people never reach. They have surface knowledge, you have deep understanding, they can pass tests, you can solve novel problems. They're fast now, but stuck later. You're slow now, but unstoppable later. Tell this story. Feynman once spent 3 days trying to explain a physics concept to undergraduate students. 3 days. Most professors would spend 30 minutes, use some equations, call it done. But Feynman wasn't satisfied. The explanation wasn't simple enough. The students were nodding, but he could tell they didn't really get it. So he kept working, breaking it down further, finding better analogies, simplifying more. And when he finally nailed it, when he could explain it so clearly that every student genuinely understood, something amazing happened. He understood the concept better too, deeper than before, because in forcing himself to make it simple, he'd had to truly understand every nuance, every implication, every connection. The slow process of simplification had made him more knowledgeable about a topic he already knew. That's the power of part 2. Simple explanation isn't just a teaching tool. It's a learning tool. It's how you go from knowing something to mastering it. Now let's talk about the third part of the method. This one transformed how I think about learning entirely. Part 3. Build everything from first principles. This is what separates people who memorize from people who understand. People who are fast from people who are unstoppable. Let me explain what first principles thinking actually means. Get clear. Most people learn by analogy. They see how something works in one situation and apply it to another. They follow patterns. They use templates. They think, this problem looks like that problem, so I'll use that solution. And this works, most of the time, for routine situations. But when you encounter something new, something that doesn't fit the pattern, you're stuck. You don't know what to do, because you never really understood the underlying principles. Contrast this, Feynman learned by first principles. He'd break everything down to the most basic truths, facts that are self-evidently true or have been proven, and then build up from there. When he encountered a new problem, he didn't ask, what does this look like? He asked, what's actually happening here? What are the fundamental principles at play? Give an example. Someone asks him about how a radio works. Most people would say, it receives radio waves and converts them to sound. Technical answer. Sounds smart, but it's pattern matching. It's not deep understanding. Feynman breaks it down to first principles. Electricity moving through a wire creates a magnetic field. A changing magnetic field creates electricity in a nearby wire. So if you make electricity change in a pattern, say, the pattern of your voice, you create changing magnetic fields. Those fields create electricity with the same pattern in a wire far away. Then you convert that electricity pattern to sound. That's radio. Same explanation, but one is pattern matching, the other is understanding. One lets you repeat what you've heard. The other lets you figure out things you've never heard. Make it practically. This is why Feynman could solve problems nobody else could solve. Not because he was smarter, but because when he encountered something new, he could break it down to first principles and build up a solution. The people who learned by patterns, they were stuck. The new problem didn't match their patterns. Feynman wasn't stuck. He built the solution from scratch, from basic principles he deeply understood. Let's share the cost piece. But here's what this cost him time. It took longer. It looked slower. While other physicists pulled equations from memory and got quick answers, Feynman sat there, thinking from first principles, deriving everything. People thought he was behind. They thought he was slow, until problems got hard, until patterns stopped working, until memorization wasn't enough. Then suddenly, Feynman was the only one moving forward. While everyone else was stuck, he was solving. Unstoppable. Direct application. So part 3. Always ask, what are the first principles here? Don't just learn patterns. Understand the fundamentals. Build from the ground up. This makes you slow at first, but it makes you unstoppable when it matters. Now the fourth part. This is the piece most people miss. The piece that ties everything together. Get passionately. Part 4, test your understanding constantly. Never assume you've got it. This is where most people fail. They learn something once. They think they understand, they move on. And they never test themselves. Feynman never stopped testing. Never stopped questioning his own understanding. Never assumed he'd gotten to the bottom of something. Tell this story. There's this incredible moment late in Feynman's career. He's in his 60s. Nobel Prize winner, world-famous physicist. He's lecturing on quantum electrodynamics, his own work, the work that won him the prize. And in the middle of the lecture, he stops, he thinks, and he says, wet. I'm not sure I'm explaining this right. Let me think about this again. Let that land as his own work, decades of experience. And he's still questioning himself, still testing his understanding, still willing to admit uncertainty. I contrast this, compare that to most people. Most people learn something once, and then they spend the rest of their lives repeating that initial understanding, never questioning it, never testing it, never deepening it. They learned it fast, but they never grew beyond that initial learning. They're stuck at their initial level forever. Make the point Feynman kept testing, kept questioning, kept deepening. His understanding compounded over time. He didn't just know more. He understood deeper. That's what made him unstoppable. Not that he learned fast, but that he never stopped learning. Fast, so give the technique. Here's how he tested himself. He'd try to explain the same concept in multiple ways, to different audiences, using different analogies, from different angles. And each time, he'd discover something new, some nuance he'd missed, some connection he hadn't seen, some implication he hadn't considered. Testing revealed gaps. Gaps led to learning. Learning led to deeper understanding. Deeper understanding led to being unstoppable. Pause. Bring it together. So those are the 4 parts of Feynman's Method 1. Never pretend you understand. Admit confusion. Build on solid foundations. 2. Explain everything simply. Use it as a diagnostic. Expose what you don't really know. 3. Think from first principles. Don't pattern match. Understand fundamentally. 4. Test constantly. Never assume you're done learning. Keep deepening. Hey, get real fight. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds great, but it's so slow. How am I supposed to compete with people who just memorize everything and move fast? And that's the exact question I asked when I first learned about this method. It felt counterintuitive. It felt like I'd fall further behind, not catch up. Let me tell you what actually happens. Share the transformation. When I started using Feynman's method, I felt slow. Everyone else was finishing chapters while I was still on page 1, making sure I truly understood. Everyone else was moving to advanced topics while I was still solidifying basics. I felt like I was falling behind, like the method was making me slower, not faster. But then something shifted. Around month 3 of using this method consistently, I started solving problems faster than the people who'd memorized everything. Not because I was quicker, but because I understood deeply. I didn't have to think about which formula to use. I just saw what was happening and knew what to do. I started making connections nobody else made, between different topics, between different fields, because I understood principles, not just patterns, and principles transfer. I started handling new situations easily, things I'd never seen before, because I could build solutions from first principles. I wasn't dependent on having seen something similar before. And by month 6, I wasn't just keeping up, I was ahead, way ahead, of people who'd been faster than me the entire time. They'd hit a wall. Their memorized patterns weren't working on harder problems. They were stuck. I was accelerating. Every problem I solved deepened my understanding. Every concept I mastered gave me tools for the next one. I was compounding. Make the point clear. They were fast. I became unstoppable. Share this analogy. Think of it like building a house. The fast way is to skip the foundation. Just start putting up walls. It looks impressive quickly. You're making visible progress. The slow way is to spend time on the foundation, dig deep. Pour concrete, let it cure. It looks like nothing's happening for a long time. But which house stands? Which house can you build higher? Which house is still standing in 10 years? Feynman's method is the foundation. It looks slow. It feels slow. But it creates something that can't be shaken, something that keeps growing, something unstoppable. And get personal. Let me tell you about the moment I really understood this. The moment the method clicked for me completely. I was working on a project at work. Complex problem. Everyone on the team was stuck. We'd tried everything. All the standard approaches. All the patterns we knew. Nothing worked. And I'm sitting there thinking, and I realize we're all trying to pattern match. We're all trying to find something we've seen before and apply it. But this is new. The patterns don't fit. If I continue the story, so I do what Feynman would do. I go back to first principles. What are we actually trying to accomplish? What are the fundamental constraints? What are the basic principles at play? And I build up from there. Not using patterns. Building fresh from fundamentals. It takes me 2 days. 2 days of thinking, of breaking things down, of building back up. While everyone else is trying quick solutions that don't work. 2 days of looking slow. The build to the payoff, and then I have it. A solution nobody had thought of. Because it didn't match any pattern we knew. But it worked from first principles. I present it to the team and it works. Perfectly. Problem solved, and my boss says, "How did you figure that out?" We were all stuck, and I say, I went slow. I built from first principles. I didn't try to be fast. I tried to be thorough. Positively, that's when I realized being slow, really slow, deeply slow, thoroughly slow, that's the fastest path to being unstoppable. Say shift tone, get practical, hen. So how do you actually implement this? How do you start using Feynman's method today? Let me give you the exact process I use. The daily practice that transformed me from slow to unstoppable. Present this clearly every day. I pick one thing I want to understand, one concept, one idea, one principle. Just one, not a whole chapter, not a whole course. One thing. And then I work through the 4 parts of the method first. I admit what I don't understand about it. I write down my questions, my confusion, the parts that aren't clear. I don't pretend. I'm honest about my gaps. Continue the process. Second, I try to explain it simply. I get a blank piece of paper, and I write how I would explain this to a 12-year-old. And I write it out, and I notice where I get stuck, where I can't explain clearly. Those stuck points are my gaps. Third, I break it down to first principles. What are the fundamental truths here? What's actually happening? Not what pattern does this match? What principles is this built on? Fourth, I test myself. I try to explain it a different way. I try to apply it to a new situation. I try to see what happens if I change one variable. I push my understanding. I look for edges where it breaks down. Make it doable. That's it, one concept, 4 parts. Takes me about an hour. Sometimes less if it's simple. Sometimes more if it's complex. But every day, I'm building one concept at a time, one deep understanding at a time, and it compounds. After a month, I've deeply understood 30 concepts. After 6 months, 180. After a year, 365. Paint the picture here. Compare that to someone who skims 5 concepts a day. Surface understanding, no depth. By the end of the year, they've encountered thousands of concepts. But they don't really understand any of them. They're fast but shallow. They've covered ground without building foundation. I've covered less ground, but every step is solid. Every concept is deeply understood. I can build on it. I can apply it. I can connect it to other concepts. The point, who's more capable at the end of that year? The person who encountered thousands of concepts superficially, or the person who mastered hundreds deeply? Who's fast? Who's unstoppable? Tell a final story. Let me end with one last story about Feynman. This one gets to the heart of why the method works. It's 1986. Feynman is dying. Cancer. He's in the hospital, weak, in pain, not much time left. And a friend visits him, and they're talking. And Feynman mentions a physics problem he's been thinking about. His friend is shocked. You're dying. Why are you still working on physics problems? Oh, slow down, P. And Feynman says something beautiful. He says, I'm not working on it. I'm playing with it. I'm curious about it. I want to understand it. That's what I do. That's who I am. That's let that land right up until the end. Still curious, still learning, still trying to understand, not for grades, not for career, not for reputation, for understanding itself. And make the connection. That's what Feynman's method really is. It's not a trick to learn faster or appear smarter. It's a commitment to genuine understanding, a refusal to fake it, a willingness to go slow so you can go deep. And when you commit to that, when you stop trying to look fast and start trying to understand deeply, something shifts. You stop competing with others. You stop comparing your speed to their speed. You stop worrying about falling behind. Because you're playing a different game. They're optimizing for speed. You're optimizing for depth. Build the conclusion. They're sprinting. You're building. They're memorizing. You're understanding. They're racing. You're growing. And in the long run, in the game that actually matters, depth beats speed. Understanding beats memorization. Building beats racing. Slow becomes unstoppable. A for direct address. So here's my challenge to you. And I mean this, really do this. For the next 30 days, pick one concept each day, just one, and work through the method. Admit what you don't understand. Explain it simply. Break it to first principles. Test your understanding. One concept, 1 hour, 30 days. Has pauses on and watch what happens. Watch how different your understanding feels. Watch how much more capable you become. Watch how problems that used to stump you become solvable. Watch yourself go from fast and shallow to slow and unstoppable. Psych jet emotional being. Because here's what nobody tells you: you don't have to be the fastest. You don't have to be the first. You don't have to keep up with people who are sprinting ahead with surface knowledge. You just have to go deep, build solid, understand truly. Do that, and eventually, inevitably, you become unstoppable.
Wow.
Final pause. That's Feynman's method. That's how you go from slow to unstoppable, not by speeding up, but by going deeper, by refusing to pretend, by demanding real understanding, by building from foundations that can't be shaken. Walk to center. I started slow, I stayed slow, and I became unstoppable. You can too. Use the method. Trust the process. Go deep. Thank you, bitch. And if you want to dive deeper into Feynman's methods, if you want more techniques, more insights, more ways to build unstoppable understanding, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're exploring how one of history's greatest minds actually worked, with practical methods you can use starting today. Join us. Let's go from slow to unstoppable together. See you in the next one. Your mind is the most powerful tool in the universe. With it, you can completely transform your reality. Everything you're living today is the result of thoughts that were planted yesterday. And everything you will achieve tomorrow depends on what you choose to think right now. Pay very close attention to me in this moment, because I'm about to reveal something extraordinary. There is a single habit that can train your mind to create the life you want. A habit so powerful it turns failures into opportunities, ideas into businesses, and knowledge into wealth. This habit is the secret to learning anything quickly, and more importantly, using that knowledge to build freedom and prosperity. The world is full of intelligent people, but very few know how to turn intelligence into results. What separates those who move forward from those who stay behind is exactly this habit: the refusal to live with shallow knowledge. Those who master this process create wealth because they see what others can't. They find solutions where others only see obstacles. They create opportunities where most people only see problems. Now think about this. How many times have you convinced yourself that you weren't good at something, when in truth you had simply never applied this habit? The truth is, your mind has no limits except the ones you accept. And when you decide to cultivate absolute clarity about every idea you touch, you unlock a creative force that can completely change the course of your life. This is the turning point. A mind trained with this habit stops being a warehouse of random information and becomes a factory of wealth and innovation.
Now listen closely, because here is the key. Stop lying to yourself. The only thing standing between you and the life you dream of is not the government, not the economy, not luck. It's your mind. If you don't master your mind, forget wealth, forget success, forget freedom. Because everything starts inside. There is one habit powerful enough to transform your life in a brutal way. Training your mind every single day until you completely master it. That means no longer being a slave to your emotions, no longer hiding behind excuses, and finally facing your mistakes head on. Ordinary people run away from pain. Extraordinary people use pain as fuel to grow. Every time you feel weak, lazy, anxious, or afraid, that is the moment to train. That is the moment to strengthen the most powerful muscle in the universe, your mind. Training the body gives you strength. Training the mind gives you power. And mental power is worth more than any bank account, because a trained mind creates wealth, creates solutions, creates paths where before there were only walls. Ask yourself every single day, where am I failing? Don't hide behind justifications. Don't throw responsibility onto others. Have the courage to look your mistakes in the eye and ask, how can I improve right now? That question, repeated daily, is what separates the mediocre from the unstoppable. The truth is harsh. As long as you keep letting your emotions control you, you will keep living small. But the moment you decide to train your mind like a warrior sharpens his sword, everything changes. Your mind stops being the enemy and becomes the most lethal weapon you possess. Training the mind means cutting the excess, eliminating weak thoughts, silencing doubt, replacing emotion with strategy. You don't need cheap motivation. You need brutal clarity. The habit is simple. Look at yourself without filters, and don't turn away from the answer. Those who run from this question are condemned to mediocrity. Those who face it every day grow. Is it uncomfortable? Yes, but it's discomfort that shapes giants. Pay very close attention to me right now. Mastering the mind means stepping into a battlefield every single day. It is war. You have to wake up each morning determined not to be a prisoner of your own thoughts. An undisciplined mind invents excuses, creates fears, fabricates limits that don't exist. It whispers, I can't, not today, maybe tomorrow. And you believe it. You live trapped by a weak voice that sabotages you. That ends today. From this day forward, face the raw truth and accept reality exactly as it is. When anger comes, channel it into production. When fear knocks at your door, face it like a soldier defending his country. Your mind is your most precious asset, more valuable than gold. Everything that exists in your life began first as a thought. Every victory, every defeat, every opportunity taken or wasted was born inside your head. And now you need to understand something. Failure is inevitable. Procrastination at some point is inevitable too. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. The problem is not failing. The problem is refusing to learn from failure. The problem is not procrastinating one day. The problem is turning procrastination into a lifestyle. Accept that you will stumble, but decide that every stumble will become a lesson. And here is one of the most powerful tools to master the mind. Write. Write down your thoughts, your goals, your mistakes, your progress. The mind is messy when it only lives inside your head, but the moment you put it on paper, you create clarity. What was chaos becomes direction. What was a storm becomes a plan. Procrastination is often tied to stress and anxiety. You delay because your mind is overloaded, because there is a fear of not being perfect, because there is an inner pressure that paralyzes you. Recognize this. And when procrastination shows up, don't blame yourself. Observe it. Ask, what is stressing me right now? What can I simplify? Many times the key is breaking the task into smaller steps and starting with the simplest one. Mastering the mind also means respecting your limits. You don't have to do everything at once. You just need to give your best today. The maximum clarity, the maximum effort, the maximum discipline that is within your reach right now. Tomorrow, you do it again. And with time, this consistency builds mental strength, builds character, builds results. So remember this: the mind is not mastered through perfection. It is mastered through training. It is mastered through repetition. It is mastered through the courage to look within and the discipline to correct what needs to be corrected. Accept that you are human, but never accept being a prisoner of your own mind. You must train your mind every single day, the same way you train a muscle. Train it so you don't get lost in uncontrolled emotions. Train it so you don't believe weak thoughts. Train it to turn fear into action, anxiety into focus, and anger into productive energy. Write. Put your goals, your failures, your victories on paper, because the mind deceives, but paper shows the truth. Clarity is born the moment you face your thoughts outside your head. Every line you write is a piece of chaos you organize. And when procrastination shows up, because it will, remember this: many times it's only a signal of stress, of overload, of fear of not being perfect. Breathe, simplify, break the task into smaller steps, and start with the very first one. Movement destroys inertia. Mastering the mind is not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. It's about giving your very best today, even if it's little, and then repeating tomorrow and the next day until you become impossible to break. It's about building discipline when no one is watching. It's about facing discomfort on purpose, because you know that's where true strength is born. This is the habit, the daily practice of shaping your mind until it becomes your greatest ally. Because in the end, it's not the world that decides who you will be. It's the mind you choose to train every single day. Now that you've understood the power of this habit, I want you to do something simple but transformative. Write in the comments the phrase, "I master my mind." That will be your first step toward mastering your mind for success. Write it as a decree, a commitment to your own greatness. Because when you declare it, you reinforce inside yourself the identity of someone who has already chosen to win. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more transformative videos inspired by the world's greatest thinkers. Every day, new ideas, new lessons, and new tools to help you build your best self. Action cures fear. If you wait to feel like it before you act, you're only strengthening procrastination. And the difference between those who achieve and those who stay stuck in the same place is this: acting at the exact moment the mind tries to delay. Now pay very close attention, because I'm about to reveal something few people ever tell you about procrastination. You may never have realized this. Procrastination isn't rest. It's the hidden source of your stress. You think you're easing the pressure when you postpone a task, but the opposite happens. Every minute that passes without doing what needs to be done, your mind keeps working in silence, like an alarm that never shuts off. That's why even without taking action, you feel drained, heavy, and anxious. The body rests, but the mind doesn't. And let me tell you something most people don't know. Putting off work, delaying a commitment, is actually more exhausting than doing it, because the weight of postponing is heavier than the effort of completing. When you decide to delay, your mind doesn't forget. It keeps reminding you over and over. When you try to relax, the thought pops up. When you try to sleep, your brain whispers, "You still haven't done it." It's like carrying a debt that never stops charging interest. But when you finally face the task and get it done, something powerful happens inside you. The weight lifts, your body relaxes, and your mind finds peace. It's as if the energy once drained by guilt is suddenly freed up to create, to dream, and to achieve more. Great achievers understood this in practice. Acting is easier than delaying. That's the real secret. The effort of doing is limited, but the reward is incredible. The effort of carrying the mental weight of not doing is endless.
And here lies the first key. Every time you catch yourself stalling, remember, you're choosing the harder path. It looks like comfort, but it's suffering in disguise. True freedom begins when you choose to act. Not because you're inspired, but because you've understood that action is the only way to reclaim the energy procrastination steals from you. So now the question is, are you going to keep hiding behind excuses? Or are you going to use this moment to flip the switch once and for all? If you're willing, stay with me until the end of this talk. I ask you for just 10 minutes. 10 minutes that could unlock your life and free you from the weight of procrastination forever. Believe me, very few lessons like the one you'll hear today are ever shared. Pay close attention now, because what I'm about to reveal is the first weapon to crush procrastination once and for all. Here's one of the secrets. Start before you're ready. The biggest mistake people make is believing they must wait for the perfect moment, the perfect motivation, the perfect energy to act. But that moment never comes. And the longer you wait, the further action slips away. The secret is to flip the logic. It's not motivation that creates action. It's action that creates motivation. And here's something that may change the way you think about action. A person with little knowledge but who decides to take a step forward is already miles ahead of someone with all the knowledge in the world who refuses to move. Those who know little but take action achieve more than those who know much yet remain still. Because it's not the size of what you know that defines your future. It's the size of the step you take. Stagnant knowledge is like still water. It evaporates with time. But action, even when imperfect, is like a flowing river. It carves a path, learns along the way, and grows stronger with every mile it moves forward. So here's an exercise that can transform your life. Whenever you feel that urge to delay, commit to just 2 minutes of the task. Just 2 minutes. Pick up the notebook and write the first line. Open your computer and organize the first file. It doesn't matter what the task is. Break the resistance with the smallest possible action. And something almost magical happens. Once you begin, even for 2 minutes, the energy shifts. The mind that resisted starts to cooperate. The body that felt heavy finds rhythm. And here is the second key. The power of simply beginning, even without knowing everything. Great achievers aren't different from you. They only learned this one secret. Never wait to be ready. That's the greatest secret. They understand that perfection comes along the way, not at the beginning. And if you apply this, you'll realize that the act of starting is already half the victory. So, when procrastination tries to trap you again, remember, don't fight it by waiting for strength. Beat it by taking a step. Start small, but start now. Pay close attention now. Destroying procrastination is not a single act. It's a way of life. It's no use starting today only to fall into the same traps tomorrow. You need to build within yourself a system so simple and so strong that procrastination finds no space to grow. The secret is in turning small victories into daily discipline. Every time you act, no matter how small the action, you're training your mind to obey action instead of doubt. You begin to create a pattern. That pattern becomes character, and character shapes destiny. This is how great minds, scientists, inventors, and achievers went so far, not because they were perfect, but because they chose to act every single day. Procrastination isn't only about what you fail to do, but about the pattern you reinforce each day. Every time you delay, you're training your brain to delay again. But every time you act, even in something small, you're training your mind to act again. This is how habits are born, through small, invisible repetitions that, when added together, create an unbreakable force. Imagine this: a person who writes just 1 page a day. It seems small, almost nothing, but in a year they have 365 pages, a full book. Meanwhile, someone with big ideas plans to write 365 pages in a single week, but without discipline ends the year with nothing but blank pages. And here's the key: it is always habit that wins over talent. You don't need to change your entire life today. You only need to start small, but repeat it every single day. Read for 5 minutes. Exercise for 5 minutes. What matters is not the size of the step, but the consistency with which you take it. So engrave this in your mind. Don't wait for perfect conditions, and whenever you begin small. Because today's discipline, no matter how small it seems, will become tomorrow's enormous legacy. Now pay very close attention, because we've reached the most important part. It's not enough to just start building good habits if you keep feeding the bad ones. It's like trying to fill a leaky bucket. No matter how much water you pour in, it all drains out through the holes. Procrastination, addictions, constant distractions. These are the holes that drain your energy, your discipline, and your life. Have you ever wondered why everything that feels like sin also feels so good? It's because almost everything that feels good pulls you into the pit. Everything that gives you immediate pleasure without discipline comes with a heavy price. The world offers sweet shortcuts that in the end lead straight into a hole. Overeating, drinking without control, the comfort of laziness, endless distractions. All of these seem to ease the moment, but they are quietly stealing your life. The drink that corrodes your health, the screen that robs your days. Immediate pleasure almost always hides a long-term prison. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. If something gives you pleasure but weakens you, it isn't pleasure, it's poison. It's like a fire that warms you for an instant but then burns everything around you. The problem isn't pleasure itself, but being enslaved to it. When you live chasing what feels good and easy, you lose the strength to build what is great and lasting. Addictions always sell the illusion of freedom, but they always deliver chains. You think you're choosing, but in reality you're being chosen, dominated, controlled. And there's only one way to break free. Decide that no momentary pleasure will ever be greater than the extraordinary life you were meant to live. Discipline may taste bitter at first, but it's discipline that brings true pleasure. The pleasure of achieving, of feeling proud, of looking in the mirror and seeing someone free. Because the pleasure of sin lasts for a moment, but its weight can last for years. So next time temptation comes, remember, what feels good now may be the very thing digging your grave. But if you have the courage to say no to the immediate, you are saying yes to the future you've always dreamed of. And here's the key. The human brain is always searching for reward. If you only feed it cheap, easy rewards, it gets used to crumbs. But if you train your mind to wait for and pursue greater rewards, you teach your soul to choose greatness over mediocrity. Trading immediate pleasure for the satisfaction of achievement is an act of maturity. It's deciding that your life is worth more than a few seconds of relief. It's understanding that true pleasure isn't found in what you consume, but in what you build.
And here's the decision you need to make. The next time temptation comes, ask yourself, do I want 5 minutes of pleasure or a lifetime of pride? The answer to that question defines your destiny. So start before you're ready. Take the first step, even if it's small. Replace immediate pleasure with the satisfaction of achievement. Feed good habits every day and cut out the ones that drag you down. And now the greatest secret of all. Without it, nothing is possible. Understand that you will make mistakes. You will fall, you will fail, you will procrastinate at times, and that's okay. To err is human. What separates failures from the successful is not the absence of mistakes, but the ability to rise and keep going.
Persistence through habit. True power doesn't come from always getting it right, but from getting it wrong less and less. Success is born out of disciplined repetition, not perfection. The great achievers all made mistakes, stumbled, failed, but they never stopped. And that is exactly what you must do. Fall, learn, and continue. Because the only true defeat is giving up. So take this as a life decree. It's not about never failing. It's about never stopping. Those who persist win. Those who insist win. And those who decide to continue, even after the fall, find in habit the key to ending procrastination. And now I want you to do something simple yet powerful. Declare your decision for change. Comment below, I decide to overcome procrastination. Let this sentence be your mark that from today on, you are no longer a prisoner of inertia. And don't forget to leave a like if this video has helped you. It's very important for us. Subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.